So, what exactly is the transcendental argument for God's existence? Well, first and foremost, we have to clearly and logically pinpoint what metaphysics are. Because metaphysics are not something that people in this modern era truly understand due to whatever secular reason that may be. And people need to fully understand what metaphysics are, because it seems as though there have been certain scientists and philosophers throughout the past 2 centuries that have kind of painted this false idea, that idea being that metaphysics are sort of a past or old way of doing things with regards to philosophy, and that we are to abandon metaphysics in the name of a more, I guess you could say, empirical view with regards to what the self is, or what the ultimate divine or ultimate meaning of life is. And I feel that is completely contradictory. And the reason that's completely contradictory is predicated on this argument that I'm about to lay out, which is the transcendental argument for God. The transcendental argument for God, or TAG, is an argument that suggests that in order for things like truth or the laws of logic or epistemology to even exist at all, requires there to be metaphysics, and in order for metaphysics to exist, there has to be a precondition for them, and that only precondition that makes sense for metaphysics is an all-knowing mind that transcends time, space, and the dimension in which we dwell, and that can only be God under this argument in which I'm laying down. So, essentially, the laws of logic, the law of identity, the law of the excluded middle, as well as the law of non-contradiction, are laws of reality and laws of thought that exist beyond the human mind. They are not empirical in the same sense that a scientific experiment is empirical. You cannot run metaphysics, hence the laws of logic, through the scientific method to prove their existence. They are self-evident in that they exist because we obey them every time we come to certain deductive conclusions or inductive conclusions in anything. So essentially, you can't make a truth claim, you can't make an ontological claim, nor can you even make any claim whatsoever without at least a little bit obeying the laws of logic, because that is the governing factor that allows for thinking to even happen. Another thing people have to understand is that for one to suggest that the laws of logic are nothing more than a human invention of the neurochemical brain, in particular, the people who do this are materialist, determinist, naturalist, or people who are in support of physicalism, materialism. These people constantly say that every single thing that we conclude that is metaphysical in reality is simply a physical process that has a cause and effect. But physicalism and naturalism in particular point at this. Well, they say that, okay, well, in order for me to have consciousness, I have a mind that has created my ability to see through my retinas in my eyes, which sends retinas in my eyes that send signals to my brain that make me come to certain conclusions about the reality before me. And they conclude that hence, therefore, thoughts and ideas are nothing different. But physicalism and materialism is a complete contradictory worldview. And here's how it contradicts itself. Well, let's say, before you, there were 2 physical objects. One of which was a rock, and then the other physical thing before you was a blade of grass. Now, let's say you put these 2 physical objects right in front of you. Would it make rational sense for me to say that the blade of grass is more true than the rock? Well, the answer would be no, because physical objects can't be true. That doesn't make any sense. A blade of grass is not true and the rock is false. That doesn't make any sense. Hence, therefore, physical things cannot be true or false. And if physical things cannot be true or false, what that essentially entails is that trueness and falseness underneath the paradigm of materialism can't exist, because under the paradigm of materialism, every single thing, including the thoughts and ideas that come out of our mouths, are nothing but physical processes that result from the laws of physics and chemistry, right? However, that also means that every single claim that a materialist makes under his own worldview cannot be true. So it's a complete contradiction. And what this essentially concludes is that there is more than just physical processes going on in our realm that allow us to come to certain conclusions, particularly ones that obey the laws of logic. And what this essentially means is that the laws of logic are metaphysical, because metaphysical things are not the same as physical things, in that they are self-evident but also can't be seen, touched, tasted, etc. So, now that we've concluded that there's more than physicalism and that metaphysics do exist, we can now determine which metaphysical claim is true, and the one that logically makes sense, as I mentioned earlier, is the claim of the laws of logic being metaphysical, which means that the only thing that could have created the laws of logic had to have been an all-knowing mind. An all-knowing mind, or God, that transcends the dimension of time, transcends every single empirical fact to ever exist, because God is the precondition for them. So yeah, the transcendental argument for God has yet to be disproven, yet it is being dismissed by certain philosophers as ontological mumbo-jumbo, when in reality it is actually, in my personal opinion, an irrefutable argument for God's existence, and no one is willing to at least recognize that it has certain amount of validity to it, except for a chosen few, whether that be Jay Dyer or even certain other Christian speakers on the media. But it is an absolutely crucial argument to understand, and it, in my opinion, does prove that God has to exist in order for certain things to exist, in order for epistemology to exist. And secularism, overall, is a contradictory worldview to its logical conclusion, unless a secularist obeys something metaphysical, which they do all the time. They put faith in their worldview. They create their own religion of atheism. Atheism is its own religion. It is its own cult, created back around the time of the French Revolution. Actually, atheism, the cult of reason by Zachaber, was created as its own cult, as its own religion of reason. So people need to understand that atheism isn't some empirical fact that just is, and and it's just the reality, quote unquote. No. Atheism is its own paradigm, its own worldview, and people need to start recognizing that. In fact, it is its own religion. People put so much faith in evolution and naturalism and Darwinism, despite the massive holes in the stories in which they create. So people need to recognize that atheism, secularism, naturalism, and all those paradigms are simply, can be treated as if they are their own faith. So for them to act as if it's just reality, or that's just life, to associate those claims with their worldviews, is absolutely nonsensical. But anyways, that is the transcendental argument for God's existence. It is a very good argument. It is yet to be fully disproven by even the best of atheists, whether that be Matt Dillahunty or Dawkins or any of them. They are yet to truly disprove this argument for God's existence. So thank you for watching, man. I appreciate it, bro.